People think secrets are heavy because they're full of lies. But sometimes, secrets are heavy because they're full of love. For 15 years, I carried one in my heart, one I never spoke about, not even to my son. And now that I'm older, and the nights have grown quieter, I think it's time I finally tell the truth. This isn't a story about betrayal. It's about love, the kind that demands silence, and the kind that leaves you living in the shadows of your own choices. My name is Camilla. I live in a small village tucked between the fields and the river. Our house is made of mud and brick, with a thatched roof that leaks every monsoon, no matter how many times I patch it. When I was young, I believed that love could solve everything: hunger, sorrow, even distance. But I learned later that love sometimes creates the silence you live with for the rest of your life. I was 19 when I married Raghavan. He was quiet, strong, and kind, the kind of man who didn't speak much, but when he did, you felt safe listening. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was good. We had enough to eat, a small piece of land, and dreams that seemed simple back then. For years, we tried to have a child. Each season passed with hope, and each year ended with tears. Neighbors whispered that I was cursed, that a house without a child was no home at all. Raghavan never blamed me, at least not out loud. He'd hold my hand sometimes and say, "It will happen, Camilla. Maybe not now, but someday." And I'd smile, even when my heart ached. Then one year, the monsoon came early. The rain washed away the roads, the crops, and the little faith I still held. Raghavan went to the city to work, promising to send money home until the fields were ready again. I didn't know then that he wouldn't return. The letter came 2 months later, a short one, written in shaky handwriting. A construction accident. He was gone before I could even pray for him. I don't remember much after that. The house felt too quiet, the nights too long. People stopped visiting, whispering behind my back, "A poor Camilla, widowed before 30. 4 months, I lived in silence. Until one evening changed everything. It was during harvest season. The air smelled of hay and smoke. That's when Sita, my childhood friend, came to stay with me for a few days. She'd left the village years ago, married to a man from another town. When she arrived, she wasn't the same Sita I knew. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. She carried only a small bag, and something about her silence told me she was hiding pain. That night, while the wind howled outside, she finally spoke. "Camilla," she said, her voice trembling, "I've made a mistake I can't fix." She was pregnant. Her husband had abandoned her after finding out. Her own family had closed their doors on her. She had nowhere to go. I remember holding her hand and saying, "You'll stay here. We'll figure this out." But even then, I didn't know what I was agreeing to. Weeks passed. Her belly grew, and so did the village gossip. I told people she was my cousin from another village, widowed and unwell. People believed me, but they talked anyway. I took care of her like a sister. We shared our meals, our tears, and our prayers. And when her child came, on a cold night filled with thunder, I was the one who held him first. A boy. Tiny, fragile, beautiful. He had her eyes, and a cry that shook the whole house awake. But Sita, she never recovered. 2 days later, she was gone. Her body too weak, her spirit too tired. I buried her behind the banyan tree near the river, where the flowers bloom even in the dry season. And that day, I made the decision that would define my life. I told everyone that the baby was mine. I named him Orun. And from that day on, he became the center of my world. At first, the neighbors were suspicious. Camilla, they'd whisper. Wasn't she barren all these years? But I stayed silent. I smiled, held my child close, and kept my secret buried under layers of love. The priest blessed him. The neighbors brought gifts. And soon, everyone accepted that God had finally shown me mercy. Raising Orun wasn't easy. I had to work in the fields, take in sewing, and sometimes go hungry just to keep him fed. But none of that mattered. His laughter filled the house, his tiny hands erased years of sorrow. He called me Amr, and every time he said it, I felt both joy and guilt. Because he didn't know. And I didn't have the courage to tell him. Years passed. Orun grew into a bright, kind boy. He had Sita's curiosity, her quick smile, and her restless heart. Sometimes, when he laughed, I had to turn away, because I could see her in him. He'd ask me questions. Amr, why don't I have a photo of Apper? Amr, what was he like? And I'd tell him stories, not about Sita's husband, but about Raghavan. I'd say, your father was brave and strong. He would have been proud of you. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. Just not the truth. When he turned 15, he told me he wanted to study in the city. I didn't want him to go, but I couldn't stop him either. I'd always promised I wouldn't hold him back from the world. Before he left, he said, Amr, I'll make you proud. And I smiled, knowing that I already was. After he boarded the bus, I stood by the road until the dust settled and the sound of the engine faded away. And then I whispered, be safe, my son, both mine and hers. The house grew quiet again. I filled my days with chores, temple visits, and letters that came once a month. He was doing well, studying hard, making friends. But each time I read his words, the secret weighed heavier. He didn't know who he truly was. And I began to wonder if I'd done the right thing. When he came home for holidays, I noticed how different he'd become. Taller, confident, with dreams that reached beyond the fields. He spoke of the city, of teachers who encouraged him, of a girl he liked. And I'd smile, hiding the ache that never left me. Because every day I saw him, I saw Sita too, the friend who had trusted me with her life, and whose son I was now raising as my own. Sometimes, at night, I'd sit by the river where she rested and talk to her softly. I'm doing my best, I'd say. He's happy. He's safe. But forgive me, Sita, for keeping him in a lie. The wind would rustle through the trees, and I'd take that as her answer. Then one day, 15 years later, the truth found its way back. It started with an old letter. I was cleaning the attic when I found Sita's small cloth bag. Inside was a faded envelope with my name written on it, in her handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Her letter was short. She'd written it just before she gave birth. Camilla, it said, "If anything happens to me, raise him as your own. Don't tell him the truth unless it's time. Let him live without shame." And at the bottom, in shaky ink, she'd written, "I trust you with my heart." I pressed the letter to my chest and cried until there were no tears left. But I didn't know that Orun had come home early that day. He stood at the door, watching me weep. And in his hand was the letter I dropped when I turned around. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the words. Then he looked at me, confused, hurt, and silent. "Amr," he whispered, "who is Sita?" He stood there, framed by the sunlight coming through the door, my son, my world, holding the truth I had tried so hard to protect. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rustle of the letter in his trembling hands. I wanted to say something, anything, but my lips wouldn't move. He looked at me again, and this time his voice broke the silence. "Amr," he whispered, "who is Sita?" The name hung in the air like a ghost. I tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. His eyes, those same eyes I'd loved since the day he was born, were filled with confusion and hurt. I found it while cleaning, I managed to say, my voice shaking. It's an old letter." He didn't blink. "From her? From Sita?" I nodded. He looked at the paper again, his lips trembling as he read it out loud. "Raise him as your own. Don't tell him the truth unless it's time." Then his voice cracked. "Raise who? Amr? Who is she talking about?" I couldn't hide any more. The years of silence had finally reached their end. I sat down on the wooden chair near the window, the same chair where I'd fed him as a baby, where I'd waited for his letters, where I'd prayed for strength every night. "Sit down, Orun," I said quietly. He didn't. He just stood there, clutching the paper like it was proof of my betrayal. So I began to speak. "It was long ago," I said slowly. "Before you were born. Sita was my closest friend. We grew up together, like sisters. When she came to me that night, she was lost. Her family had turned her away. She had nowhere else to go." I paused, staring at the floor. She was with child. Her husband had left her. She was frightened, weak, and I took her in. He didn't say a word. "When you were born," I whispered, "the gods gave me a second chance at being a mother. But they took her away. She didn't survive." The tears finally came, quiet, slow, and heavy. I buried her near the river. "And from that day, I raised you as mine. Because you were mine. You are my son, Orun." He stared at me for a long moment, his chest rising and falling. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like his own, he said, "So, you're not my mother." I shook my head. "No, I am your mother. In every way that matters. I fed you, loved you, prayed for you. But I didn't give birth to you. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. The room felt too small for both of us. I don't understand, he said softly. All my life, I thought Apper died before I was born. I thought I knew who I was. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to have peace, I said, reaching out. Sita wanted that too. She didn't want your life marked by shame or questions you never asked for. He looked at me then, and for a second, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who ran barefoot through the fields, who brought me flowers from the roadside. But the boy was gone. All that was left was a man trying to make sense of a lie told in love. That night, he didn't eat dinner. He sat outside under the neem tree, staring at the moon. I watched him from the doorway, just as I had when he was a child, when he'd fall and scrape his knee, when he'd cry but didn't want me to see. This time, there was no bandage I could give him. Only the truth. Days passed, and silence filled the house. He hardly spoke to me. He went to the fields, came home late, and avoided my eyes. Every plate of food I left for him went cold. Every word I tried to say was swallowed by guilt. At night, I sat by the window and whispered to the wind. Sita, he knows now. I did my best, I swear. Please watch over him. Sometimes I thought I heard her voice in the rustling leaves, or maybe it was just the wind trying to comfort an old woman. One morning, I found him packing his bag. Where are you going? I asked. He didn't look up. I need time, Amr. I need to think. My heart sank. For how long? I don't know, he said, slinging the bag over his shoulder. Then, after a pause, he looked at me with red, tired eyes. You should have trusted me with the truth, he said quietly. I would have loved you anyway. And with that, he walked out. The sound of the gate closing behind him was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. I sat down on the doorstep and watched the dust settle where he'd been. I didn't cry. I just sat there, the morning sun warming my face, wondering if I'd done right or wrong. Weeks turned into months. His letters stopped coming. The house grew still again, like it had years ago, before his laughter filled it. People asked where he'd gone, and I told them he was working in the city. They nodded, and I smiled like everything was fine. But inside, I was waiting for a letter, a word, anything. Sometimes I'd go to the riverbank and sit by Sita's grave. The banyan tree had grown tall now, its roots deep and strong. I think he's angry, I'd whisper. I can't blame him. I took his truth away, even if it was for love. The river never answered, but its song stayed gentle, as if to tell me that some things can't be rushed. A year passed before I saw him again. It was early morning when I heard footsteps outside. When I opened the door, there he was, taller, older, eyes softer than before. Amr, he said quietly. I froze. The word felt like sunlight after a long storm. He stepped closer, holding something in his hand, a small garland of jasmine. For her, he said, glancing toward the river. We walked there together in silence. He laid the flowers on Sisha's grave and stood with his head bowed. I don't hate you, he said finally. I was angry, but I understand now. I wanted to speak, but my throat closed. He turned to me, his eyes wet. You gave me love, Amr. Maybe not the truth, but you gave me everything else. That's when I couldn't hold back anymore. I took his hand in mine, rough, strong, familiar, and whispered, I only ever wanted to protect you. He nodded. I know. We didn't speak much after that. He stayed for a few days, helped me fix the roof, repaired the fence, and brought rice from the market. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the fields, he said, I have to go back to the city. There's work waiting. But I'll write, Amr. I promise. I smiled. That's all I need. He touched my feet before leaving, something he hadn't done since he was a boy. And for a moment, I felt peace. But when he walked away, something inside me whispered that our hearts would never fully return to how they once were. Some distances stay, even after forgiveness. Now, years later, I sit by this window again. The fields are golden with harvest, the same as they were when I first held him in my arms. Sometimes I see him in the distance, a man now, married, with his own life. He visits during festivals, brings sweets, calls me Amr with a small smile. But the air between us is different, not cold, but quiet. Like two souls who love each other deeply, yet stand on opposite sides of a secret that time can't erase. At night, I still talk to Cedar. I tell her about her son, how he grew strong, how he forgave me, how he found his way. I tell her that her wish came true. He lived without shame, he lived with love. But I also tell her the truth, that I still carry the weight of silence, even now. Because love and truth, they don't always walk together. Sometimes one has to stay behind so the other can move forward. The villagers say I'm lucky. A mother who raised a good son, who lived a decent life. Maybe I am. But luck has its shadows too. Every time I hear a child call out Amr, I remember that first cry, his first breath in my arms. That moment wasn't born of lies. It was born of love. And that's the truth I'll carry with me, even when all the others fade. I don't know if there's forgiveness waiting for me beyond this life. But if there is, I hope Sita will be there, smiling, her arms open. I hope she'll tell me I did right by her son. And maybe, just maybe, I'll see Orun once more, not as a man burdened by truth or silence, but as the little boy who once ran into my arms and called me Amr.